welcome to an exciting episode of The Energy That Surrounds Us. Gotta catch my voice. My name is Michael. I'm your host, and we are doing a special episode. This is my first pre-recorded episode for all of you who are going to be watching this on December 5th. This is pre-recorded, so in the chat room, don't feel like we're ignoring you. We're not there to see you. And the reason we are doing a pre-recorded show is because my guest tonight is in the UK, and there's no way I could actually ask her to get up at 3 a.m. to do a live show. That is just asking too much of this wonderful person. And with that, I give you Deborah Lilith Hatswell.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for inviting me on. It's an absolute pleasure.
Well, I'm glad you could come on, and I'm glad we could make this work. And I'm sure everyone is aware of who you are, but for those who are watching in the States who maybe not, can you give a little background to who you are?
Yeah, my name's Deborah Hatswell, and I live in the northwest of England, in the UK. I'm a parapsychologist and an investigator. I investigate cases of the strange and the unexplained. I never had an interest in the subject. I didn't come to it because I wanted to be a paranormal, investigator. None of that. That wasn't the plan. But unfortunately, that's how life turned out for me, because I had a series of paranormal events when I was much younger, and I found them very traumatic and hard to deal with. And then growing up, there wasn't really anything or anybody that I could go to and speak to it about. It was a very shameful subject, let's put it that way, in my family. It wasn't discussed outside, and so I didn't have any teaching. I just had to kind of navigate life myself, doing all of the wrong things, making all of the wrong mistakes. And like I say, I think I was 15 when I had an event that changed everything for me, and that was 40 years ago. And I've spent the last 40 years at first trying to find other witnesses, I think for validation for myself, and just to know that I wasn't crazy, because I thought I was crazy with the things that I was seeing. And it led me on a journey where I've met so many people, and I've spoken to so many witnesses now, that I think I've got a good understanding of what it's like to experience a traumatic event and then actually have to navigate life going forward. You know, you still got your job, you've still got the children to see to, a mortgage to pay for, but you might be experiencing things around the home. You might be having events when you're asleep. You know, it might be a UFO event, an event with a cryptid. They're all unique and different. But one of my skill sets is I'm not one for sending a team in. So I've made those mistakes before, where we have a small haunting event that's going on in a house. You send a paranormal team in, they open a whole load of nonsense and they leave. And that leaves the family in a much worse position. So what I try and do is get them to work with the investigators, but they do really what I call a shutting down ceremony. So we give them the tools to empower them to be able to really set some really intent boundaries. And that's what you should do with any kind of activity, regardless of what it is. And they just need a bit of help and guidance. So that's what I do. And then when they're through that and they're on the other side of it and another case comes in, I'll then ask them if they can help with that case. So it's kind of a pay it forward kind of system that we have.
That's incredible. And so I'm curious, with you saying that you got into parapsychology, was that something that you grew up and was like started getting interested in, or is it because of the paranormal?
Yeah, because of the events in my life, to be honest. When I was about, I think my first memory of something paranormal or supernatural was in my room at night. So I actually remember being in my cot. I was probably about 2 or something like that. And in England back then, we lived in what we call it's a tiny little house. It has 2 rooms downstairs and 2 rooms upstairs. There's no toilet in it, a bathroom. They're outside in the yard. So I would see things in my room, in the corner of my room, and they used to terrify me, like shadow beings and things like that. And I'd tell my parents what was going on, and they'd say like I was dreaming or I was just being dramatic or being naughty, to the extent where they actually took me to sleep clinic to see if they could cure me of all of this. But mum and dad saw spirit. Gran and granddad saw spirit on both sides of my family. I come from a long line of people who see spirit, but they were incredibly ashamed of it. For some reason, you need to be ashamed if you're Irish in the UK. And B, if you're a medium of any sort, it really is looked down on, and it was for most of my life. So the parapsychology came in. I had to treat myself. I couldn't go to a doctor. I couldn't go to anybody and say, look, I've seen this thing, and it's absolutely terrified me. I was 15. It was the daytime. So paranormal stuff is not supposed to happen in the daytime, not when it's sunny. I was at school, and I didn't go in the afternoon with my friend. We both decided we were gonna play hooky, as you Americans say. It's only about 1:30 in the day, Michael. It wasn't late at night or anything like that. And there's an old abandoned mansion, like an Edwardian mansion, and it's built on an old plague field. So not the best area, but I don't know that at the time. I knew this with hindsight. And there's an energy ley line that runs right through the middle of the building. And I realised later on that probably had some play in what happened to me that day. I was with my friend. My friend was on this side of me, and we were laid down, laughing and talking, and it was a really nice day. And as I turned, I noticed a movement in the greenery and the trees, and this thing just leant out at me, only from about here up. And it kind of went like this, and it was this. I don't know. It was a man and an ape pushed together. For me, he's always been the man ape. For the girl who was me, he's the gorilla man. He was horrible. He was absolutely horrible. He had huge shoulders and huge muscular face. He looked like a Neanderthal or a caveman of some kind. Like normal lips like mine, but obviously much bigger. And no canine teeth or anything like that. Just ordinary human teeth and like almost human eyes. But we kind of locked eyes with each other for a split second. And I acted without, it's not a conscious thought, but I pushed my friend down to the floor so she couldn't get up. And that's how terrified I was. And I got up and I ran in the opposite direction. And when I looked back, he just leant back into the greenery and he was gone. He wasn't there anymore. He was completely gone. Wow. It should not have happened. It was completely impossible, but it did. And not in that moment, because I don't really have much of a memory. Till I just ran and ran and ran and ran. And I remember coming to at what you would call a freeway. So like the highway, the motorway, and worrying about having to cross it. And that was probably my first realistic thought that I'd had since the event. Went home, told mum and dad, no interest whatsoever. They said it's probably a homeless man or something. It wasn't a man in a suit. It wasn't somebody dressed up trying to play a trick on two girls that were there that day. Back then, I thought it was flesh. Yeah, I thought it was like flesh and blood, like a chimp or an ape. So I thought, right, it'll be a circus. There'll be a circus in town. An ape will have escaped. I've seen it in the park, and that's it. I'll explain it all the way. Never ever did. I saw his face again though, in America. Sykesville monster case from the 1980s. So similar time of mine was 82, and a number of witnesses had seen this creature in Sykesville, and the police officer had got them to do a sketch, like an artist sketch, a rendition. And I'm working on a case for a witness, and I'm going through Google trying to find some photos for her to pick out, and I see the Sykesville monster. And I was right back there, Michael. I was crying. Couldn't catch my breath. I threw the laptop on the floor. It was almost like I was back at the event. That's how frightened I was. Now, what I didn't tell you was the in-between years, I'd grown up fishing outside, sleeping outside. We were very countryside, nature people. The second my dad finished work, we piled it all into the van and we went out and we slept wherever. I couldn't do that again after being 15. I got married, had 2 children, couldn't take them into the woods, couldn't camp with them, couldn't do any of that. And my husband just said to me that day, right, Debbie, you've got a decision to make. you either put this away forever because it's cutting corners off your life. You're that frightened of this thing that you're doing nothing. Or do what you normally do, just run at it. And I thought, he's right. The only way I'm going to stop being... I thought he was behind every tree, Michael. So I thought, he's out there looking for me to come and get me because I've seen him. You know, that was my mind thought for like 30 years.
Well, that's totally natural.
Yeah, now I realise I was probably just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and two worlds met that day for some reason. I don't know. I don't think I'll ever get my answer, but I'm okay with that. I'm in a different place. So I just learned I couldn't go into the woods in the dark. I couldn't leave the windows open at home. I thought he'd climb through the windows and come and get me. So I'm not like that anymore. I'm completely on the other side of that. But I had to teach myself how to deal with that. And that's where the parapsychology comes in. So not only have I had my own personal experiences, over the last probably 40 years, I've probably spoken to over 4,000 people about their experiences. So I see the pattern. It doesn't matter what it is that terrifies you. Terror is terror, regardless, whether that be, or something paranormal. And one of the things that we can do, like I say, is I don't tell them lies. I say, I can't tell you what happened that day. I don't know. I wasn't there with you. I can give you all of the theories and we can look at them together. And whatever your gut instinct tells you to do, that's what we'll do. You know, we'll do it that way. So, I mean, there's so many cases I could tell you about, but I don't want to keep boring your listeners going on with me, little Sam. But there's some, I worked a case in September. 88-year-old man saw something for the very first time in his life. He was at home. It's about 3 o'clock in the morning. He gets up to go to use the bathroom and he hears a tap on the window. He's never had any paranormal experiences. He's not an investigator. He's just an ordinary chap who lives in a farm that's quite remote down south in England. And as he looked to the window, he said it was a dog-like creature, but it was stood up on 2 legs. Its ears almost tipped on top of its head. And it looked surprised to see him. So he was absolutely hysterical. His carer come running in. And obviously, he was distraught because he'd just seen something that was terrifying. Fortunately, the carer had heard about me and he phoned me in the morning and said, please, Debbie, is there any chance you could do something just to help him? And I was actually in hospital at the time and I said to him, yeah, just give me 5 minutes and I'd sneak out. So I went to my car and I phoned him up and I just said, don't tell me anything. Don't tell me anything. Let me just ask you some questions first. So I asked him if he was of Irish descent and he said, yeah, mum and dad were both Irish. I asked him what was on the land there that was incredibly negative, almost portal-like. And he said there was a building next door that was abandoned. And the people who'd had it before had used it for satanic ritual. And that place had never been closed down. I asked him what had changed at home. And he said that was the first night he'd slept downstairs. For all the 80 years he's lived there, he's always slept upstairs. But because he was so ill, they put him downstairs. So it was easier for him. And they'd cleaned up and the carers had been, but they hadn't put the curtains back up. So the first time in decades, that living room's lit up right, with the man in the bed. And then I asked him if he'd been thinking about death at all. And he said, yeah, I have, Deb. I'm 88. I'm at the winter of my life. So I've been and arranged my funeral. And I'm looking back on things, worrying really that maybe some things I've done in life might stop me going to heaven. So he was frightened. He'd made some decisions in his life that he thought would affect his death, you know. And then I asked him and he said, how did you know all these things? So I just said, I've seen it so many times in other cases. If you are of Irish descent, sometimes when you are very, very ill or you're passing on, you will see what they call the death wolf. And it's not as frightening as the name of it sounds. It hasn't come to kill you. It's come to walk you home. So it kind of guards you at your most vulnerable time. And that's why I knew that there would be something on that property that was negative, you know. So I just knew. So now he's in hospital at the moment. He's really, really poorly. But I have got there's somebody down there at the farm and he's had no further incidents. I promised there wouldn't be any further incidents. And I said to him, Fred, If it came for you, it would have taken you there and then, and you would have just become one of the missing. I said, the fact that it was shocked when you saw it tells me it wasn't there for you. If it's shocked that he'd seen you, you know, it wasn't there purposely for you. I think you just caught something out. And when we're very close to death, the veil is much thinner, much easier to tune in. So I just assured him that anything he decided were bad deeds, as long as he was genuinely sorry for them, then that was enough. And, you know, God would forgive him and he could pass peacefully and go on to his next life. Because that's all as humans want at the end of the day. We just want to know that we're going to pass on in a nice way. I don't really know any other way. So we don't go to hell, do we? We get all this hell and brimstone. And we put a lot of pressure on people. And I said that to him. And I asked him how scared he was. And he said when he was a little boy of 6, he was involved in the Blitz during the war. And back then they'd go down into the subway. And he was at Bermondsey. And the biggest bomb that was ever dropped in Europe was dropped on the train station when he was there. And he said he remembers being a little boy of 6 and his mum getting his hand and saying, "Come on, son, let me walk you home." He said, and there was a lady on the floor, Debbie, and she had no head. And that was our postmistress. He said, and it was even scarier than that. So that's where the parapsychology comes in for me. I say, right, you can phone me anytime you want, night or day. It doesn't matter, just ring me. If you've got a worry or you're upset or you think there's something around the home, just ring me. Luckily, his carer, I think is a medium, because he's been able to pick up on some things that I didn't pick up on. And we've been in contact probably for years and years and years. So it was kind of serendipitous that it had happened to this guy. But I was able to put him at ease. So after I'd spoken to him, he wasn't frightened. So I'd been able to take that away from him. So for all I am the poorest woman in England, I am rich in many other ways, because that, for me, that was, I was able to help an older gentleman who might
that's
not.
a true gift.
He might not have been able to find anybody else, you know. I couldn't. I never found anyone in England that had helped me. And that's why I do what I do, because I think there's so many of them out there, all across the world, who think that they're on their own and they're experiencing stuff and maybe it's in their head or there's something wrong with them. And society will tell them that it's their fault or they're just imagining it. You know, well, you must have done something if you've something demonic coming to your house. It doesn't work.
And that's one of the reasons why I love doing the podcast shows, is because we're helping, in my mind, people when they tune in will be like, I've had that experience, so I'm not alone. Other people have had this and feel comfort and be like, okay, so, and the other thing too is going, okay, so if they experienced this, then all these other things I had experienced, maybe there's something to them too. And it kind of gives them confidence and the desire to go within and to research.
That's it in a nutshell, in an absolute nutshell. So even if they've not experienced the same thing, seeing how somebody is welcomed or how easy it is to share definitely inspires other people to do the same thing, because they think, I've been holding this. Anything that you have to hold back feels wrong. If you feel that there's something about you that you can't share with people, it kind of puts a dark connotation onto it. So, like I said to you earlier, we're just trying to normalise this as much as possible. You can sit in a room with 10 people and say, put your hand up if you've had an experience that you can't explain. And 9 or 10 of them. And if it's not them, it'll be a friend or a family member or someone in the family. As simple as that thing we do where we put our keys down and we know that that's where we've put them and they vanish. And then we have to say, right, come on, stop being silly, put my keys back. And then the keys will come back. Lots of people have experiences like that in their life and they don't discuss it because you kind of file it away because it's not discussed, is it? So you just file it away. And I got sick of filing things away. I just thought, this is like drinking poison slowly every day. and just doing nothing about it. Like, so I'm letting this fear build and build and build till the point I was frightened of being frightened, which was absolutely ridiculous. So it's just, now I'm not. I can go and stand in a dark woodland. It doesn't bother me at all, because I realised that, like bullies, any entity out there that's out there to scare me has one weapon against me, and that's fear. And if I don't fear it, there's nothing it can do to me. And I know that sounds really, really simple, but once I worked that one out and then I saw it in practice, I thought, I've got you. I know exactly what to do. I honestly believe that some people from early birth are plagued throughout their lives. Something feeds on their fear. So it will come to the bedroom, you'll see it at work, you might see it when you're driving, it might be a night visitor when you're asleep. But they have this consistent terror all throughout life. And if I can teach them to not be scared of it in any way, we've already won a battle, because they're discussing it with me, you know? So it's out there, and like anything, once you start talking about it, it's really, really helpful. And then I just say to them, if you need me to stick around for, 4 or 5 weeks, you just ring me when you need to ring me. And 9 times out of 10, they don't need to. They're just really grateful that there's someone out there who said, yeah, no, I have heard of other people who are sharing what you're sharing with me now. I've spoken to other people who've been in the same situation as you, and this is what they've done. And if you want, I can put you in touch with them. And then, let's jump on a Zoom call, and I'll introduce you to everyone. We'll have a coffee and a chat until you feel comfortable. I kind of strive to do that, Michael, because I really believe that human beings genuinely are nice people. I know not all of them are, but genuinely, the people I meet want to help others, and they don't mind helping others. They're not out there to make a buck or anything like that. And I've never met a person yet where I could message you tomorrow and say, Michael, there's somebody, in Texas, and I'm worried, he's going through, so would you have a chat with him? And then you have a talk with him. That guy knows that there's somebody in the same state as him that understands him. He feels heard finally. He's known, as we say in the UK. We now know his truth. And every human being on the planet just wants to get their truth out there, before they pass.
Yeah.
And I would imagine you are.
That's true. And it's interesting you bring up the fear, because I went to a location near my house, and this one particular night I was up by the attic entrance, and I was up there with a little group, and they were like, oh, you need to go get so-and-so. And so I was like, they were like, okay. And I had no fear of what was there. And I could feel like pressure on my arm, and it would let go. And I was like, well, I don't like to antagonize the spirits, but I was like, something inside me said, this is a rare moment, engage. And next thing I know, I start going, do you know who I am? And they go, yes. And I go, are you afraid of me? And it goes, yes. And I said, did you try to grab me? And they go, yes. And I go, you burned your hand, didn't you? And they go, yes. And it scared them that they could not get to me.
Could not manipulate you. Why do they start with a young child or somebody who's sick and injured? Because they like any bad thing, they want to get you at your most vulnerable. Because they feed on this bloody fear. And I don't know what that's to do with. I mean, I don't even know what name to put to that. I just call them energy feeders. I've spoken to females that have been, I can't say the word on YouTube, but almost an entity situation where something is in that bed and has very bad intention to them. And I've spoken to males in the same situation, like a succubus or incubus kind of interaction. And I often ask them if anything happened when they were in the teens, because that's when we come into that kind of energy. And for some unfortunate people, that's when it starts, in their teens. And they can suffer with that till they're 60 or 70. And it might be the first time they've ever spoken about it to anybody. And I always say to them at the beginning, I get it, I'm a complete stranger. When I first ring you, let's not talk about the event. Let's just have a chat. You have a coffee, I'll have a coffee. We'll just have a chat and feel each other out. And then if you're comfortable speaking about it, then we'll do that. Because I think you get more out of them when they comfort.
Right.
So a lot of people will say to me, my daughter said it to me today, and she said, Mum, do you know, like you used to drink in your 20s? Are you not worried that people will know that? And I said, no, Erica, I'm not worried at all. My paranormal experiences led me to the fact that I would drink to try and escape that. So I had a problem with drink. I haven't had a drink for almost 20 years, but back then I did. And it was fear. I was still running away from the fear, you know? So I think if you're honest with people and you say, no, I've made all the mistakes in the book, all of the mistakes in the book, believe me, and some of them I've made more than once, but it gives me a unique outlook. So it's like, I understand why I did that. I understand why I went through those things. Any other fear activity, you sat down with someone and you debriefed. So if you're a police officer or you're in the army or, you know, special forces, if you have some form of interaction that's terrifying, like war or death, you debriefed. So they talk you down. If you've seen a UFO or a Bigfoot or a dogman, you know, entity in your bedroom, there's no debrief. There's get on with it yourself whilst trying to protect your family, not knowing what to do. You've got all this confusion. And I just think, how many of them are out there in that same situation thinking, I'm on my own with this? And all that they're seeing out there at the moment is just paranormal teams going into the house, curing everything in 20 minutes and walking away. And that is not a true picture of how you shut down any form of attachment. You can't do it like that in just one go. It's absolutely impossible. You might be dealing with a being that's probably ancient, might have been on this earth millennia. So people will say, well, that's fine. I'll use the word of God. Well, you can. But if it has no respect for your God, nothing's going to happen. The only thing that can stop that coming and feeding on this person is this person saying, no, enough. You won't come through my door. You won't enter my bedroom. You won't be on my land. You won't show yourselves to my children. And when I can teach them to say it like that, it shuts down. It shuts everything down. So I don't have to send a team in to make things thousands of times worse. You know, I just have to make that person. Sometimes I'll say, what would you do if it was a man that walked into your daughter's bedroom? And what would you do, Michael, if someone came in your house, walked up the stairs and went into your daughter's bedroom? Did Mum make out there?
I don't think he'd be walking out of the house.
Well, that's what you need to do to spirit and negative energy. You set clear boundaries. You don't have to be disrespectful, but you meet them as an equal and not as a lower. And you say, enough. This is not happening anymore. And you shut it down. And it will try and come back like a bad ex. And you shut it down again. And you shut it down again. And we continue to do that until it's gone. There's nothing it can feed from anymore. And it just goes. There's nowhere for it to go. So.
Right. You activate universal law, which
exactly.
is what I was taught in metaphysics. And
yeah.
And the key to it is you have to stand in the power of yourself, nobody else, and own the words and believe the words and use the commanding voice with it. And that's the key, because a lot of people will say, well, I did that, but then a couple of days later, I was talking to a friend about it and it came back. I said, because you invited it back when you talked about it. When you let it go and release it, you cannot talk about it, because that's like an invitation back.
We're all energy at source, whether we're humans or we're beings. And when you feed that energy, it grows. So if you give it what it wants, which is attention, like a naughty child, it grows, you know. In the same with your guide, when you meet the positive guide, the more you trust them, the more your abilities grow, because you believe that you have these abilities, you know. And I think every human being has them at varying degrees. And society shuts that down. As soon as you start seeing something as a child, you're told it's an imaginary friend, or you're just daydreaming, or, you know, so you eventually, by the time you're 7, you don't discuss it with anyone, and it kind of pales off for most folk. But then they shut down for life. So you don't want that either, because each of us, every single one of us on this earth is here for a reason. Thousands and thousands of people had to fall in love, Michael, for you to be here and born. And that's not for nothing. So you found your skill set. Your skill set is talking to people like me and being a paranormal investigator, and you use your ability for good. If you were a different man and it was about ego and kudos, it would all go very negative. You would be getting negative attachments because that's what you want. But I don't know if you have, but I've worked with people who have these attachments and I've told them how to get rid of it, but they're quite happy having it. No, he's been with me since I was 21 and I asked for him in a moment of anger, and I think there's nothing I can do here. There's nothing I can do because you want that relationship with it. I don't get that. Have you ever worked a case like that where they're quite happy to, almost like it's entertaining?
I do know of some people who have like guides that they call attachments, and they're friendly and they help them. And so I'm like, that's one thing. But I said, but don't blindly let them take control of you and dictate your world. As long as it's symbiotic, that's fine. I have no problems with that. But and then I'll have people that'll say, oh, when I was young, this happened, and ever since then I felt this. And I was like, did you ever want to let that go? And they're like, well, but it keeps me safe. And I'm like, is it though? Or is it keeping you from doing things? And that's the trick you have to get their mind to wrap around, is to go, yeah, is it holding me back or is it actually helping? And if it's holding back, then it's time to let it go. And sometimes it's easy for people to let it go and it release, because it's like, hey, food source no longer here, moving on. Or if it's like, well, you're kind of wishy-washy, so I think I'm going to hang around because I might still be able to get some more out of you. And they're going to be like, well, it didn't work. It's like, well, because you didn't really put your backbone into it.
Yeah, that's it. You'd be amazed what people ask me. They ask me to put curses on people. They ask me to, could you do this and could you do that? And I say, yeah, I probably could, but I'm not going to. Because anything that I put out there like that's going to come back to me. And whether you believe in the rule of three or not, whatever you put out there will come back. So it's okay to gift people. So you can gift them and say, I give you the gift of inner sight so that you can see yourself how other people see you. So I tend to kind of do it that way. So if it's an awful person and they're bullying somebody else, I'll just gift them all of their deeds to come back to them. So a gift and a curse are two very different things. But if they don't believe in that, it won't happen. It doesn't work. You've got to be a belief there at the beginning that this can happen, So
you're actually nicer about it than I am, saying 3, because I'll say, just be careful what you put out there thought-wise, because your thoughts can come back 10 to 100-fold back to you. So if you're sitting there saying, I want so-and-so to break their hand, you may be getting a lot more coming your way than a broken hand. And they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. I'm like, yeah, you might want to think about that before you start wishing harm or illness on someone.
Exactly that. We're not supposed to do that, are we, as humans, are we? We're supposed to be our best selves if we can be. But what we've got, Michael, is our human selves, our self here, was made for the planet when we first walked it, right? So all of those things, that hearing things, seeing things, telekinesis, that was natural. That was a natural ability. In the same way that you can tell if one of your family members is ill or if they've got a problem, and you say, what's wrong? You can kind of feel it, that because they're connected to you, aren't they? That they're your family members. So back then, everything that we consider now as an ability or an alternative was actually just normal for us human beings. So we did commune with the sky and the earth and the weather and the planets, because back in the day, we didn't have a clock, we didn't have a calendar. So we just us and source, as I would call it. So like the energy that you came from, kind of thing. So you'd be grateful And in the UK, we had what we would call a green man. So he would be around at harvest time. So like at this moment in time now, where we're halfway through winter, we celebrate him. We're Saturnalia because that means we're always out of the dark side. And I think when that was natural, we accepted people's abilities, the mediumships, you know, the hands and the healing. I think we accepted that. But it's 2023 and we're all plugged into the matrix. So it's poo-pooed. It's made to look silly because it's a strength. It's a human strength. And like I get on my soapbox about the elite, but that you know, society is the biggest cult in the world. There's just 4 or 5 people at the top. All the money's going upwards. And people are at the bottom just starving and like Dante's Inferno, aren't they? So I ran away from being an investigator. I didn't want the responsibility of it. I don't know. I just thought it'd come with all this. I don't know. I was probably scared of it, I think. Or if I felt silly saying that I can meet someone and get a good read on them and see whether they're a nice person or not just by touching their hands. So like you'll see me when I shake hands with people, I do it like this. And I get a really good feel off them and I can see whether I gel with them or not, you know. And I think when you say that to people, they say, oh, I can do that. I can meet someone and instantly know whether I like them or not. And that's that first century brain. That's what kept you alive. 2023, you think about here. So it's when we're relaxed so that things are able to come through. So like you, when you go into a paranormal investigation, you're in your element. So you know what you're doing. You're incredibly confident, you're really relaxed, and you can open yourself up. For some folk, it's when they're in the bath or driving the car or when they're in bed. They have a paranormal experience because you're at your most relaxed. So you're using a different part of your brain, if you get what I mean. So if I can relax people down who are absolutely terrified because they've seen something, I can get them to look at the situation again from a different way. So like for me, I was that terrified by this thing that I never learnt to drive. My parents moved into the countryside, big beautiful house in the country. There's no way I was going, not a chance. So I kind of put the scarpers on all of that. Looking back, I think I had to live that life so I can empathise so much now, you know. But human beings are absolutely extraordinary beings, and we're not told it because it keeps us under control.
Right.
So you understand that it's like this. You're just weak. You're nothing. Just go to work, go to bed, pay your bills. Go to work, go to bed, pay your bills. Because if we realised how powerful we were, we wouldn't put up with it. We'd be like, actually, no. If we all stood up like this and said, no, one day we will work out that there are billions of us. We're not the minority in any way, shape, or form.
No, we're not.
No, we're not.
And what's interesting to me is when you were saying with your experience when you were the child going, you know, you say I was in the wrong place, wrong time. Mm-hmm. My mind goes, actually, I view it as the other way. You were in the right place, right time to get you started on the path of where you are now.
I can see it now, but I couldn't see it then.
Right.
But you are 100% right. If that hadn't have happened, I wouldn't do what I do now. So all those people that I've helped, I wouldn't have been there to help them. So how did my mum say it? It didn't happen to you. It happened for you. And it was like, I get it. Now I get it. So some of our hardest lessons in life are really, really good teaching moments. Yeah, go on. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in on you.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was going to ask a question, but I'll let you state your point.
Well, you know, I said I make mistakes just like everybody else. I tell everybody to listen to the gut instinct. If you're going to go to a place and you get that, don't go. So I'm in the car one night with my husband, and what we do, me and him, we do a lot of clearing works. So we'll go around to areas that used to be of worship in the UK, where lots of dark and negative things are happening, and I will try and change the energy of that area. So it might have been an ancient burial site, but now we're riding motorbikes on it, you know, so the respect isn't there anymore. It turns negative. So we do a lot of work like that. And I tend to just drive. I just say to him, just drive and let's see where we go. And I wait till I get the feel. I'm in the car and I said to him, are we going to Blackleach? And he went, yeah. And I went, ugh. I literally made that noise. Ugh. And we still went. So I didn't listen. We pull up in the car. And before I even got out the door, this black thing just come roaring in my ear. Everything started to spin. I think I was hit with infrasound or something. I wanted to vomit. I was on my knees in the bottom of the car and I'm shouting, drive, just drive, get us out of here and drive. And Mark's like, come on, Debbie, do what you do. And I'm saying, I can't. It's too strong. You've got to get us out of here. You've got to get out of here. He's going to kill us. And I could see it in my mind's eye, chasing us in the car all the way home. And it didn't lift. So like normally I do my protection and it lifts and it wouldn't. I couldn't get it to lift. So like for 2 days I had this constant vertigo. And he just kept roaring at me. He was so angry at me. And one of my friends went and looked up the area where we were. And she said to me, Debbie, you drove onto a graveyard on Halloween. On Halloween night, you drove the car onto an old graveyard. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I went back and I said, I was sorry. I went back that night and I said, I am sorry. I intruded on your time and I didn't mean to do that. And I have learnt my lesson. And I will always trust my gut from now on. But I just said to my husband, I tell people all the time, but I didn't take my own advice. But that's the only time, Michael, I haven't been able to get it away from me.
It sounds like you came across a guardian.
I think that's exactly, I was just going to say that. I think I intruded into, I think if I'd have met him in different circumstances, he wouldn't have been as enraged with me as he was. But I just stumbled into something sillily, didn't listen to the warning and expected everything to be fine, you know. And I don't think he would have listed if I hadn't gone back and said sorry. I think he was just going to keep going at me until I learned that it isn't okay to do that. You know, it's just not okay. I should have researched where I was going before I went, and I didn't. And I do now. I always do now. I know.
So one thing I'm curious about is you brought up some of the cryptids that you've come across. Do you look into cryptids because of your own natural curiosity or experiences, or does it come from casework and you're like, you know, this sounds really interesting. Let me learn more about this.
I never had an interest. I don't know how to describe myself growing up. I was very outdoorsy. I like to ride a horse. I like to be out with my dad fishing and didn't spend a lot of time doing TV and things like that. And honestly, back then in England, we only had 3 TV channels. So I don't think many Americans realise that. In 1982, there was 3 TV channels. That was it in the UK. And in the 70s, they used to go off at 11 o'clock at night. So it wasn't all night TV. So there wasn't a whole lot of that about. There'd be some American programs and my dad had watched them. But as a kid, I was probably out every available moment. I had to be outside the house. I was outside the house. So I didn't have an interest in it. And when I saw that thing at 15, I didn't know what it was. So the only thing I could look for then was like a caveman or something. And I told you, I jumped on the CB radio and I started speaking to people. I'm quite lucky. I live in one of the highest points in the UK. And we have a huge radio transmitter quite close to home. So I'd go up there on the CB radio and I'd speak to truckers and eventually long wave radio and short range radio. And I speak to Americans and they tell me about Bigfoot sightings and Sasquatch. So they say to me, what did it look like? And I'd say, well, it looked like an ape. And it was all hair covered. And it had like really muscular jaw and like its headpiece here was really muscular. Sounds like Bigfoot. So, but Bigfoot's a 10 foot tall and he's not 10 foot tall. But I didn't realise then that cryptids are different in different areas. And so like you might see an American giant in the northwest of America. It might be 9-10 feet. But down in, say, Kansas or Ohio, I always can't pronounce that. It might just be maybe 6 foot. You know, the skunk man's only about 6 foot in Florida. So I realised that it was different. So I believe what I saw back then was a cryptid. But I don't know what he was, whether he was flesh and blood, dimensional, I don't know. So I predominantly studied Bigfoot, Sasquatch, cryptids all across the world. I did that for about 20 years. So that's my main area of expertise. All of my paranormal work was done not online. That's private. That's only something I've started letting people see in the last 4 or 5 years, because I did it separately. And in the UK, it's just really hard to come out and be a witness to a creature anyway. So there's nothing people can say to me that would offend me. They can call me a liar. It doesn't matter. I'm over that now. I'm over all of that. But yeah, so it's never an interest. I started doing the research looking for answers. So in the same way that someone had witnessed a spirit and then end up eventually being a paranormal investigator, because the only way I think I could understand it was to look at all aspects of it rather than hiding from it. It got bigger and bigger. So when I started studying it, I realised I was good at it. It was something I was good at. It was a skill set. So I started mapping cryptid reports all across the country. And then as cases had come in from like America or Russia or Europe, I'd map them as well. And then I started looking into anything else that was in the area. So say it happened in Birmingham, I'd look at around that area and see if there was any paranormal reports or UFO reports, because I'm a great believer in activity tends to happen in certain areas of the world where the energy is different, like the ley lines and things like that. And in the UK, lots of our cryptid reports are on those ley lines. Even like dogman reports, there always seem to be around burial ancient sites. So that was really my area of expertise. But most of the paranormal work I did in private, because I do a lot of clearances, or I do a lot of attachment work where I take things off people. So they don't want to be public. They don't want me to talk about it on YouTube. But that's changed. That's changed massively. And next week, I'm opening a new YouTube channel with a TV firm, because finally, for the first time, people are happy to sit down like this, me and you, and speak about what's happened to them. So I've set up a number of witnesses going forward who are just going to sit down on camera with me and tell me what happened to them. And then we're going to ask if there's anybody else out there that's had the same experience. And I'm hoping that that's going to take off. I think that'll be quite interesting for people. And just do as many different subjects as I can, because I'm still learning. So, and I think I'll always be still learning, because each case brings in something new. You know, so there are cases that I don't understand, and I have to give them to other investigators, because I don't know how to do them. And I'll say, this is not something I feel comfortable in. So let's go to somebody else. Let's find somebody else who I think can help me. That's how I met Andy Coates, because he'd had experiences of his own early on. He had a real interest in the subject. He wanted to know why. And he was quite happy when I said to him, Andy, is there any chance you could speak to this lad? He's a working class lad like you. And he'd say, yeah, not a problem, Deb. And I've kind of set up that reputation now in the UK, where people know that they can trust me. And you don't have to share your experience on publicly. You can speak to me and I won't tell anyone, you know, if that's what you... I like to put the control in their hands. So if they'd just rather just have a private phone call, then I do that. But now, more and more people are like, no, it's fine, Deb. Just put me on. I don't mind. Just film me. It's time. I think the need for answers eventually takes over the fear. So you can kind of put, especially when you get to our age, because I think there are 3 times in a human's life when our energy jumps up. So when you're like, for girls, it's like 13, 14. For boys, it's a bit older. It's about 15, 16, when they mature. So you come into that sage energy, as they call it. And then when you're in your 30s, when you become a parent for the first time, so you're like in your 20s, 30s, your energy changes again. You become very protective. And what we don't realise is sometimes energy can pick up around them. And when you get to my age, I'm 56 now, I'm the age of the crone. So there isn't anything that worries me now. So I'm here to teach the younger ones as they're coming forward, you know. And I think, why didn't I learn that at school? That our energy changes as we grow, you know. Why didn't I learn at school that lots of people see paranormal things around the house? Or lots of people see UFO. Well, you know, why aren't we taught these things? Why isn't it not normal? So my parents could have said, well, actually, Deb, we don't know what it is, but other people do see it. You know, I think that would have been very different for me growing up. I think I'd have been able to, I wouldn't have been as wayward, as my mum would call it. But you touched on it before. You said, one of my first thoughts, Michael, was, if he's real, what else is out there? What else is out there parents don't know about? Or do they know about him and they're just lying to me? So I don't know what was worse. And I realised that they just haven't got a clue what's out there. So how many other people don't understand that this thing's out there and it's going to kill us? So I lived under that. That was me for 35 years. It's going to kill us. It's going to find us and it's going to kill us. So now I can say, I just think two worlds collided at that moment that day, and I had no intention of killing me. He did nothing to frighten me. He didn't growl at me. He didn't reach to get me. He did nothing to frighten me. It was the experience itself that frightened me. So I want to be hypnotized, Michael. I want to go back to that day.
Well, it's interesting that you say, like, you know, your parents, you know, still say no, you know, they don't believe, because I had a spiritual teacher who, when I was growing up, somebody asked her, you know, how come, you know, UFOs don't just park themselves outside to say, here we are? And she says, I will tell you this. You take a room of 30 people, you go outside, 15 of them who are believers will say, wow, look at the UFOs and the being that's coming out to greet us. 10 of them may be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't see a thing, because their mind doesn't grasp what's there. It's filtered to say UFOs don't exist, so therefore I don't see the UFO.
That is exactly
and she'd
right.
say 5 may see something, but not believe it, because they're like, no, that's, you know, that's television, you know, that's got,
you talk to excuse it away, aren't you? Well, it must just be this, or it must just be that, or it's just, I think that's natural for humans because you taught to do it. But you're right. I think you've got to believe, or you're not going to experience anything if you don't believe in anything other than just this existence. I've had TV companies come to me and offered me riches, but they have no belief in the subject. So what good is that to me? I'd just be entertaining. I'd just be this entertaining monkey. I'd much prefer to work for free with people who really do believe. You know, they really do have a genuine interest in the subject. That's where I need to come from, because I do believe, we're going to have to get, I don't know, something happened there. I mean, Wi-Fi went off, but it's come back on, luckily. It's a bit stormy outside. It's quite normal. I just think now, going forward, I just like to do as much as I can on other people's cases, because I'm not going to get an answer to mine, what he was. It doesn't matter to me what he was now. I've had a different relationship since then. We've had the automatic writing and everything, all of that's gone on. I don't fear him anymore. I think I want to go back. I want to go back to that day and have a really good look at him and see what he looked like. You know, I thought he was 10 feet tall, and it took me 35 years to go back. And I went back with the Finding Bigfoot team, and they were so awful with me that I just refused to be on the programme in the end. They had no interest whatsoever, you could tell. But going back did me the world of good, because I was able to see that he was probably only about 7 feet tall, because my husband stood in the same place where he was. So I was able to at least shrink him down a bit in my mind. But 7 foot tall is still 7 foot tall. So nothing out there should be 7 foot tall. But one thing I haven't explained yet is, probably 25, 30 years later, Thomas Markham from the Crypto Crew in America messaged me and said, Deborah, you're not going to believe this, but I've just got a woman who's come forward who had an experience in the same park as you with the same thing 2 years later. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah, there's a testimony. And he sent it over to me. I was 15, she was in her 30s. So it was 2 years later. It was about 5 p.m. for her, but it's winter. So where I live, it can go dark at 1:30 in the day, right? So it's quite normal for it to be dark at 5 p.m. She's walking the dog and she's having a cigarette. And as she's having a cigarette, she looks, and there's this thing stood there, same place where I saw it, but she saw all of him. She said, at first I thought, he's got nothing on his feet. And when I looked, I could see his male area, and I realised he had no clothes on whatsoever. So she's processing this thought in a millisecond. you know, as she's seen it. And she said he was completely covered in hair. He looked like a chimp and a man pushed together. He had a kind of a pot belly and a bit of a hunched back to him. A flat nose like a boxer, and that's definitely what I saw, and like human lips. So she saw exactly the same thing as me. So I just went public with it in the UK and just said, if there's anyone else out there, well, I found a man in the 1950s who works in the same area, was walking to work early one morning and saw a chimpanzee drinking water from from a stream with cupped hands. In the 1970s, a gentleman who used to sell ice creams was finishing work for the night in the dark, and he went to have a quick pee at the side of the golf club, and he saw what he described as a hairy, naked man chasing a fox on the golf course, believe it or not. Then in 2012, we have a gentleman out on a mountain bike trail, and he looks off to his right and sees this gingery looking creature kind of hunched like a gorilla would be on its knuckles. Right. And it looks at him and takes off into the bushes, gone. 2015, we've got a gentleman, same area, with his son walking. They say a grey figure that stands up at the side of where the trees are, and they kind of look at it through the mist across the thing, and it just goes. So the dad goes over to see where it is and realise that it's been stood in a dip. So for him to be able to see it, it would have had to be 7 or 8 feet tall. Then you've got 2 ladies next to the mansion house where I was. One of them's having an anaphylactic shock. They've had to phone the ambulance to come out. She's out there, lay over the car, gasping for air. And this grey thing growls at them out of the bushes. Then, I've not finished it. Then we have 4 men playing golf on the golf course who, middle of the daytime, see something, what they think is a thief who's coming for the expensive golf clubs, kind of scooching about in the rough. So they're waiting for these like thieves to come running out, and this creature stands up, and they said it's kind of gesticulating with its hands to them as if to say, go away, go away. And without thinking, they step forward, and as they step forward, they hear a call, like a scream, a cross between a scream and a snarl come from the left of them. So they look, don't say anything, and when they look back, it's gone. The creature's completely gone. All this happened in a 2-mile radius from the 1950s up to 2021. So I wasn't the only one in my town, but each and every one of those witnesses thought they were the only one in my town. And if I hadn't gone public with it, we would never have known that. All of those tales would have just gone into obscurity, and it would have gone. So I don't know if we saw the same thing because the descriptions are different. For me and Brenda, the lady in 84, he was very dark haired. I would say not black, but like a bear, like a black bear. But when the sun hit him, there was a kind of organ, a redness to it, you know, as if it wasn't completely brown. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm noticing time-wise, we're at the hour. I don't know if you need to go or if you have time to answer a few more questions.
I've probably got another 10 minutes, and then they'll have to go. My husband's waiting to go to bed.
Okay.
Well, no, buy some questions. You can always bring me back on. I don't mind.
I'll definitely be bringing you back on because I am fascinated by this, and we've only touched I feel like, tip of what is going on with you and all that you have to share. But one question that just came into my mind that I am curious about to ask is because all of this was in a 2-mile radius and the sightings are so random. Do you feel like there could be an entrance to like Hollow Earth or another dimension that they're coming through portals, and that's why the situation is the way it is with them?
I do. I think some of the creatures that we see are flesh and blood, the ones that leave footprints and hair behind, and the actual flesh and blood creatures. So you could put Bigfoot and Sasquatch into that. But they've also been seen to just vanish into midair, leave one print in the middle of a snowy field. So I think there's a dimensional element to it, me. I really do. I think what I saw that day was, I call it the quantum world. I think there are other worlds that run alongside us. And every now and again, I can see into them. Or they can see me. I connect in some way. I don't know. I don't understand it at all. I stopped trying to understand it now. I just trust it. So I know that it's going to happen. So there's no fear involved for me. And I can just go with it. So yeah, I do think a lot of the dogman reports, I think, are very, very dimensional. And I think some things are ET in origin. And I also believe, Michael, that there are entities out there or beings out there that will appear in a way to either A, make you accept them, or B, to terrify you. So absolutely terrify you. And I think sometimes I don't know what case I'm working. I have to work through those levels, if you get what I mean. I would say what I saw was 100% flesh and blood, but he cannot have been there. It is impossible. So I look at the land. What's different about this piece of land? Why is things being seen here? I go all the way back as far as I can go. In the 14th century, it was seen as bad. You didn't build on there. You didn't do anything. Hence, when we had the plague, that's where we buried the bodies, because nobody wanted that land. So how many dead bodies are on there is beyond me. And then in like the 15th, 16th century, some man with a lot of money's come along and he's built a big wooden, beautiful, like you'd imagine Henry VIII, black and white Tudor mansion, burnt down in the first year, gone. So then they built the stone one on top. As you walked out the entrance of that home, there was 4 huge stones. One was obsidian, one was limestone, one was some form of like boulder that had come out of a glacier or something like that. And there was one more, and I can't remember what the one more was. But I think there's something on that land that enables this creature, whatever he's called, to come through. So I start looking back on early. There's a very famous alchemist called John Dee. And he's had a lot of serendipity in my life, as John Dee's popped up quite often. And then I find that he's at this home. And him and Edward Keller have scribed with obsidian and asked a hairy demon to come forth. So if they've opened up something, Michael, in the I'm getting messages, sorry. I've got just 1 minute. I've got somebody talking to me. If they've opened a portal or something in that ground in the 15th century and it's never been closed down, and then for all those years people have been walking. Who's Matthew? I've got somebody, just 1 minute. I've got somebody called Matthew speaking to me down here. Just step back a minute. Just step back just a little minute. Right. So Matthew is to do with somebody who's out there listening. He was in a motorbike accident when he passed. And he wants you to know he's happy. He's incredibly happy. Please don't be sad anymore. Just keep moving on. And he just keeps showing me a flyer. I don't know what it is. Like a pendant. Like a football pendant. With a flyer on it. He knows what he means. I don't know what he means. But it's for somebody out there that's listening to me. And he loves you. He said, I love her. I really love her. So I'm sure somebody will let us know who that is. And sometimes that happens, unfortunately. It's just because I'm really relaxed and there's nothing I can do about it to make it stop.
Oh, no, I totally respect everyone doing what they do. And
what you said is exactly right. I do think it's something to do with the area. Yeah, I think something happened there that allows this to go on. Trying to look at other activity. Have there been ghost reports? Yes, there have. Have there been strange deaths? And yes, there have. There've been bodies hidden in the park, like murders and things like that. So I think it's just added all of this kind of negative energy on top of it, and it's kind of self-fulfilling. What's really sad is they are raising it to the ground and just building apartments for people to live in. So I don't know how that's going to go.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
And to kind of flip it real quick, I know we're running out of time, and respecting that, real quick, when I researched the dogman, because when I was on Andy's show, they were, people were asking me about dogman, and I had never heard of it. Because when I was researching it, all the claims I were getting were daytime, nighttime, afternoon, hot of the summer, cold of the winter.
Mm.
It was like there was no like set pattern to where you can say this is when a dogman's going to appear.
Yeah.
Do you feel he is a dimensional cryptid, or do you think he's just really good at hiding like the Bigfoots?
The descriptions are different. So some witnesses say what we would describe as a werewolf: ears on top of head, snout, tail, hands and paws. I think they are dimensional. I think they come in and out dimensionally. But then we have the other, where it's a human body. So he's got hands and feet, male genitalia, ears, but still a wolf's head, ears on top of head, things like that. There used to be old tribes called the Benedanta, Cynocephalese, Scottish wolvers, and they were dog-headed creatures that fought on behalf of man against negative influences. Saint Christopher was said to be a dog-headed man, a little bit like Anubis. And then we have what I would class as I think military. I think they've been made by the military, or they're governed by the military in some way. These weaponized, thickly muscled black dogs that walk up on two legs. And you'll hear it as you do more and more research, you'll start to realize that the descriptions are very different. So the flesh and blood ones are said to drop from a tree. So if they're hunting, they will drop down from a tree onto the back of a deer, snap the deer's neck, down it goes, and they take it off and they eat it. Now, that a dimensional doesn't need to eat. It doesn't need to be near to water because it's dimensional in aspect. What I don't know, Michael, is why are they here? Why are they here in our plane? So many of them are seen around ancient burial sites and modern cemeteries, yeah, and that's in the US and in the UK. So I think there's a connection to death somehow, like Anubis. So I don't know if some of them are actually guarding that portal to stop things coming through, or are they guarding it in a way of like so that they can use this power against us? I don't know. But I think your listeners will say, because they'll be listening to other podcasts and they'll think, she's right. Some say hands or paws. Like the chap in the farmhouse where something knocks on the window. He said it was somewhere a cross between a hand and a paw. But yet other people have seen them with actual hands. So they're manipulating things and they've got real hands. So they can't all be flesh and blood, can they? Some of them have got to be dimensional. They're coming in from other dimensions. And lots and lots of the reports of like the weaponized ones, the hybridized ones, happen on military defense land. So always on an old military base, or the area in the UK, so on the northeast coast of the UK. So you remember we were at war with Germany. All of our battlements are along that coast. So a lot of our MOD land is along that coast, and there is a high number of dogman and werewolf reports along that coast. So people are still seeing them 21, 22, 23, but they're on the military defence land, and the military have packed up years ago and gone. So are they tied to that land in some way? I just don't know. And they seem to be the ones, this is what I'm touching on, that are often described as predator-like. So people see, like the Predator film, this almost prismatic being moving through the woodland. You can't see it, but you can see the trees moving around it. And that, to me, that could be tech of some kind, I don't know. But that's an ability that I cannot describe. Almost like they are mirroring their surroundings, like the being in the film. And that worries me. I don't know what's scarier, seeing a 7-foot-tall dog man, or knowing it's there but not being able to put your eyes on it. How do you fight that? That's a question to end on, isn't it?
That is a great question to end on. And before I end it real quick, where can people find you if they want to ask you questions?
I've made it really easy, actually. Everything's just under my name. So if you put Deborah Hartswell in YouTube, I'm going to pop up. You just put my email addresses out there. It's just debbiehartswell@gmail.com. But in a moment, when we finish, I'll send you a link that you can put into the description. Or if anybody asks you, you can just send it a link. It has everything of mine on there in just one handy place. And I'm more than happy to help you. And if I can't help you, I'll stay with you until I can find somebody that can. And they might get in touch because they want to help me. If you're out there and you want to help people in the same way that I do, just hit me up. because I've got hundreds of witnesses all sat waiting to be helped.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Deborah, for coming on and taking the ride with me on this episode. And we look forward to having you back on, because I'm sure we're going to have a lot more questions and there's a lot more to talk about. And so thank you. And I hope everyone that when they're watching this in the chat room has a wonderful night, day, or evening, wherever they're at. Next week, join us as we have Vicky Joy Anderson coming on. And so I am going to play our outro to say good night to everyone out there. And so thank you for watching.
Night, everyone.
You have just listened to The Energy That Surrounds Us with your host, Michael Kopf. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode.